Hey guys, we are back. Welcome to Rankable. This is not even, I don't even know what episode this is, right? The number wise, but I want to, guys, we have a special episode. Happy International Women's Day to all the professionals and all the ladies out there, especially to these two young ladies I have the pleasure and honor of being with right now. I'm your host as usual, Jared Thomas, account executive at iPullRank. I have my lovely co-host, Chantel Branch, the best AM in the game. Let them know, Queen. Let them know, Queen. Yes, and we also have a special guest. This person is a great friend of mine. She's the creator of advising Gen Z. She has a lot of different programs. She's a freelance author, freelance reporter. She's an author, brand ambassador for Women That Soar. She holds a BS in ethical leadership, MED in leadership and development, and currently pursuing her doctoral degree in leadership and learning. My good friend, Kristen Geez. How are you, Queen?
Hi, I'm so excited. I mean, honestly, this whole introduction and this energy you have going on, I just need to put it in a boombox so I could just have it remind myself, like, you are that girl. Did you hear what Jared said? Did you hear how he described you?
That's it, Queen. You deserve all the praise. And this episode is all about you, Queen. So, like, what we wanted to do with this section, with this, segment, we have actually gonna be doubling up all month, but it's just highlighting amazing women who are doing incredible things in their career. And just thinking about your introduction, right? It's like, how do you balance that all? And that's something that we want to go into today with this conversation of, how do you balance it? What's been a focus of yours? What are some of your career goals? And what is some advice we could give to the young ladies who are next up in the generation? But let's start from the very beginning. Like, let us know a little bit about your story. Where you're from, how'd you get into the industry, and kind of lead up to now.
Yeah, so I'm in Dallas, Texas, so from here. And honestly, I was a bully in school, so was really big. I think one of the things that I like to say often is when you have all of these skills and no one actually sends you through a class to teach you what to do with it. And skills being, the core of a bully means someone that is able to motivate. Whether I motivate you by fear or motivate you by inspiration is my choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is at the core being able to motivate people to do what it is that you want them to do. And so I really was kind of going through school. Yes, I was in activities, but not being able to really utilize that skill. I've also been always really good at organizing things, right? Like pretty good at it. Now, at the time as a young girl, I was definitely organizing crime, right? Like how we were going to get away. I'm far removed from my position of things now, right? But those skills of organizing people, it was a thing. I would teach them how to go and steal, and we would go out in herds and then come back. Just so much. But I think in high school, when I finally had my wake up call, I got expelled from one of my campuses and had to go to a predominantly white school. And when I went there, the principal was like, hey, this is the first time that we've ever had at least 30 African Americans through the whole school district. We have never celebrated Black History Month program. Clearly, you know how to motivate people to do what you want. So I'm going to put you in charge of this task. And so when she gave me the task, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. So I actually told her no, but she was smarter than me and called my mother. And my mother was like, you finna do this Black History Month program for the district. That's what you do today.
Shout out to mom.
Yeah, shout out to mom for sure. And so during that process, I finally got to see all of these skills that I had naturally possessed that no one had taught me how to use differently, right? And not a blame to them, just me having all of these skills of organizing and speaking and getting people to do things. I hadn't used it in the right way. And so after that experience doing it for the district, we were able to actually get one of the Cowboy players to come to the school. And so it was really organized, right? I then saw, okay, I like talking, I like organizing things. And, I didn't really know what I wanted to do outside of that. I was doing modeling outside of school. So I had in my mind visualized when I graduated, I would finally be 18. My mom couldn't tell me that I couldn't do what I want to do anymore. She didn't have to tag along, and I was just going to go off and be a model. So that was always my vision, right? And so when I left high school, I actually didn't even plan to go to college. So my mom and my aunts had taken me to look at a few universities, had given me the money to pay for my application, never gave the school the money, never even sent in the application.
Wow.
And it was finally like around August, my mom was like, hey, so when do you go to college? I was like, oh yeah, about that. So I signed myself up for this modeling agency, and because I was turning 18 in September and this was in August. So I was just kind of like, let me just keep avoiding this conversation. And so to my surprise, she dragged my behind to college anyways. And so I still did that. And surprising, this is a funny joke in our family, considering I'm doing my PhD and I didn't even want to do a bachelor's degree at the time. But just goes to show you. But during that whole process of going to Wiley, which is HBCU, I then learned the other side of organizing people, right? When I went to that predominantly white school, yes, I did a Black History Month program, but the only prerequisite that I needed to have to do that was being an African American, right? So now being in this space where I'm with people that look like me, that speak like me, that are way more proficient and have found other ways to utilize their skills, and they didn't need as much hand-holding as I needed because I chose to use my skills for bad. Here these great, phenomenal Black people are doing these great, phenomenal things for causes, and I wasn't inspired before going to that school to really give back in that way. And so in that experience, I was still doing modeling and had in an agency where I was the only Black girl, the only African-American model that they had. And so, yes, I made a lot of money. At that time, when you think about making $150 an hour, that's a lot of money to be 20, that's still a lot of money right now as an adult. So let's first of all.
I'm about to say, send me the link. I'm about to go with it.
As an adult, but especially as a young kid, right? And so I was put into a lot of situations that didn't necessarily make me feel comfortable because we mostly did most of our modeling for kind of the sports industry, right? So the girls that are maybe walking around the rink with the flyers or, just always half naked. It really didn't match how I was raised. As far as like the image wise, I was never put out there in too much that I couldn't come home and tell my family about, but definitely was not something that I had done on my own. And so as I started doing that, I felt myself kind of being lost. I wasn't really focused on what I wanted to do in school. So I actually went back and visited my high school principal, who was assistant superintendent at that time. I talked to her and I kind of told her, I'm really hating my job. I'm making so much money, but I feel like I'm always the problem child because I always reject the outfits that they give, the environments that they put me in, and everyone else, not that they didn't have the same morals or things. They had an end goal of why they were there. I didn't have an end goal. My end goal was that I wanted to do modeling. I had nothing else I wanted. These girls had either wanted to do something in communications or wanted to find their husbands. There was a goal there and there was no goal of mine. And so as I'm telling her this, and I came to her campus in the company's vehicle and I'm looking all shiny like a model, all the kids are like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. I want to do exactly what you're doing. And I'm like, no, I'm here because I don't know what I want to do. And this ain't it. And so I started talking to her and telling her, she said, why don't you pitch to them for you to start doing more, since you're doing sports and that's the industry you're in, why don't you talk to them about doing sports for high schools and you just go around and do the modeling for high schools and go through pep rallies and give away prizes and really just like promote their brand to a younger audience. So I'll help you pitch that idea. And so she did. And I think it took me about 2 weeks. I was bold enough to send them an email and say, hey, I want to do a presentation. And because I was a model and hired to be pretty and not hired to make my own words, they were surprised that I even knew how to do that. But that wasn't a skill that was required of the job, right? The job was totally. So when I came in and was able to present my ideas, had a PowerPoint. I mean, honestly, when I look back at it now, considering like my creativity, it really was low key, but it got me in the door. But I did that presentation and they said, we love it. You have 6 months of your contract left. Go out and go to all the football games, basketball games. And when that season's over, come back and show us the data from all of our social media pages and show us the data from that younger audience. And so every week I went out to a different school. I was able to get up and do pep rallies. I was there on the field, talking on the microphone, giving away prizes, just kind of advertising more to a younger audience and still in that sports industry, but in a younger audience. And every time I went to a different school, kids came up to me, saying, oh my God, I want to be like you. And I was like, I used to make 150. They're now paying me 725 because this has nothing to do with what they want. So I'm taking a big loss just because I want to feel, confident in what it is that I'm doing. Right. And so when I finished doing that for 6 months, I then sat down and came to my beautiful mother who has a background in business and management. And I was like, hey, I think I want to start a business. I'm not really sure like what I want to call it, but I know that somebody should have told me all the things that I learned in my 20s that I wish somebody would have told me in high school. We had all these guest speakers that came and told you that if you go to school, you'll have the answers. If you try hard, you'll be able to do it. But no one told me these life skills. Like, one, I'm not going to have the same friends that I thought that I was going to have. 2, that boyfriend that I thought was my husband is probably not my husband. 3, I can go to college, but it's my job to decide what my major is going to be. And 90% of us graduate with a major that we're not even using, right? So just these things, like no one was ever having those real conversations with me. And so I went to the library and I wrote down every single thing and lesson that I thought someone should have taught me. And in that experience, it took me about 8 months. I was then able to say, okay, now let me find some parents. And I had a small conversation with some parents that I had come in contact with as I was going out to these schools, and asked them, what are some things you wish that your child would be taught by their mentor? And really and honestly, those moms, which I'm still in contact with them today, there's about 7 of them, and Caucasian mothers at that, took the time to read all of my material to make sure that it was something as a parent that I would want my kid to be learning. Because I knew one thing that I knew for sure was that if you get the connection to the parent and you get the connection to the school, that you now can take the holistic approach in really saving these kids, right? Making the same mistakes that I had made, because I had made so many mistakes doing this lifestyle that I was committed to doing, right?
Yeah.
And so in that whole journey, I then reached out to all 46 of those campuses that I had gone and done the speaking for. And I said, hey, I have a pilot program. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'd like to pitch it to you for the first semester and see what you think. And it's been 9 years since then. We're now in Oklahoma and Louisiana and Texas. And so it's just grown, but it really came from being lost and me being bold enough to go to someone that was wiser than me and say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm willing to do it. And I'm also willing to sacrifice my income to decide if this is really what I want, which is a big thing that none of us are really willing to do. We think as soon as I got these accolades, that means I need to be hitting the ground and I need to write checks. But the reality is those checks come at a cost, whether the cost is you being able to pay for you financially or your mental or spiritual stability, right? And so that's really got into the industry of where I am. And that's also where that reporter freelance still comes in, because I still was connected in that industry and working with Women That Soar. As I was going through these ranks of creating my business, I stayed with one finger inside of content development and speaking to people, but I wanted to make sure it was inspirational and that everything that I did matched where God wanted me to be, where my purpose was, which is really helping and molding people. While I had in this mindset that I was going to be a model, God was like, no, you're going to be a role model, and you're going to be a role model for the misguided because you were misguided.
That's real. I love that. And then we have the opportunity to speak with like a lot of CEOs, and they say the same thing. And I love it. Like the average person, you could easily say, look, I'm making that 150. I'm getting this bag, right? You could have said there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't care about it. But I love that you pivoted. And then the fact you took the advice from the kids, right? Because it's like, if I'm doing it for myself and I'm not helping the next generation, like what really is it about, right? Somebody's going to come behind. I know I had that same, issues. I've never had a mentor until I'm 31. Wow. I didn't have a mentor to 31 to somebody tell me, Jay, do this, Jay, do that. You could actually do this on social media. So I love the fact that you pivoted and made that happen. And I'm curious to know too, like so you were a bully as a kid, right? Mm-hmm. And then you did your TEDx on bullying. So what was the experience of being on your TEDx talk, and why did you choose bullying? Because I'm sure you could have chose many other topics. So why does it mean so much?
So surprisingly enough, I'm going to give some shout out to Justin. I had never even thought about doing a TED Talk. All this time I have been doing all this hard grinding, working with my team, obviously going into these schools and serving. It was not all Kristen by any means necessary. So I was being CEO, but also being frontline leader because I was in the campuses, and a part of me never really wanted to come out of the campuses, right? Like I knew that I would one day get to an age where I needed to pass the baton, which I have to Mariah Martin. And, but I knew that day would come, and I was just like, I still need to know what the kids are doing, and I don't really want to fully commit to being the executive CEO. I just don't want to. This sounds boring, and I'm not trying to do it. And so I had also been praying in the meantime, like, I really needed a larger influence. If I really want to impact these kids, it's not enough for me to get all these degrees and to have all this experience. I need to get into a position where I can demand the changes that I want to see. Those changes being when you look at minorities and how many of them are getting sent to ISS or being sent to being suspended. And then you look at the court system and you look at the same ratio of ethnic groups. it doesn't match. How is it that all of these students that are Caucasian or teens who are Caucasian, you don't see them getting in trouble in the school system, but you see all of it in the court system, or vice versa, right? And so I knew that I wanted to get into a position where I could kind of bridge that gap and really help the school and the court system kind of see where they're not necessarily failing the kids, but where there's areas of opportunity for growth. I knew that my program was going to be that program. And so as I started talking about that and kind of just being intentional, praying consistently, I finally was like, okay, I need to figure out how I can get an influence outside of just Dallas, because everything that I'm trying to do in Dallas, as much as I love it, we are very slow moving. And I knew that I didn't want to move somewhere else. But if I did move to a New York or California, I could have hit the ground running. Or even if I would have been a person that was not of color, I could have hit the ground running a long time ago. So I had to figure out what was going to be that thing that would be able to launch me without me physically having to move. Right. So when I started praying that prayer, I randomly got an email, which is hilarious because I thought it was a lie. I got an email from a company based from a tech company that's everywhere, cell phone company, right? And they said, hey, we are looking for a young person to come in and talk to our leadership team about how to market to Gen Z. I'd never gotten an email like this before, but considering my business and what I do, we are considered the top 10, right? So when I got that email, I was just like, this is probably a lie.
And just to interrupt, for the purpose of clarity, Gen Z is people who are ages 22 to 7 years old.
Correct.
Right. So people born from 90, well, maybe they have a little bit more than 22. Like, what is it, 97 to 2012?
Yeah. And I know it's really, when I look at it from a school standpoint, it would probably be those kids that are in third grade right now until maybe they may have just graduated, but they'd be about 22 years old.
Got it. Okay.
So they asked me, how can we market to them as far as creating technology? What do they want? And so when I got that email, I assumed that it was a lie. And so they said they had reached out to me and 2 other people. The other 2 people were not based in Dallas, but this specific event was going to be in Dallas. They were flying them in. And so I had Googled them, and one of the young ladies had done some work for HBO and created content for them. And the other young man had started working for NASA creating content. And so I'm like, Kristen, where am I in this lineup? I've not done any of these things. And so, yes, I had worked with the kids, but I'm talking about a national brand, right?
Yeah.
And so I went to this meeting and I spoke and ended up like doing really, really well, right? I knew my kids and I knew how to talk about that. And so when I was done, the young man that was on the panel with me and said, hey, I Googled you. You've done a lot of stuff. Why have you not done a TED Talk? And why have you not based your program outside of just Texas? If you would live where I lived, you would have been like, I don't have neither one of us have a direct line to kids. You are serving 7,000 kids. Why is it that, where is that reflecting anywhere outside of these school systems? You've got to pull yourself up out of the school and start getting more of these accolades. And so he was like, the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is a TED Talk. So as we sat right there, I was like, a TED Talk, and he Googled it right then. Justin was on top of it. I'm not going to lie. And it was kind of intimidating because I was like, no one has talked to me like that. My mentors don't tell me to do that. I've done everything they said to do, but that also tells you now you're at a new level, right? I've maxed out all the advice. Doesn't mean that they're no longer my mentor. It just means now in a different capacity, right? And so we started talking about it. I left, I applied. And then when I applied for TED Talk, I applied for 4 different locations. And I was like, if I do it, what do I want to do? What I knew for a fact that could come back and bite me in the butt is my experience as far as being a bully. So I knew that if I was going to branch outside of these schools, I had talked about it openly to my kids, to my campuses, but I knew that I was going to have to be transparent about my story in the areas where I had shortcomings, but I learned these great valuable lessons. So I knew that I needed to tell the truth about that first before I ever tried to reach to a new audience, right? I needed to own who I was. And a part of owning that was a big part of me being a bully, right? That's why I'm so passionate about these kids that are getting in trouble. That's why I'm so passionate about listening these solutions and making sure everybody is held accountable to the same standard. And that wouldn't have came if I hadn't had years of me getting in trouble when everyone else got to go, right? That wouldn't have came without me realizing like, no, you probably should have had a class for me to learn how to use these skills. You can't just expect all of us to be straight A students, which is ironic now considering where I am in school. But at that time, I wasn't motivated to do that. And that in some ways is the job of your parent and your teacher and for you. But if there is not an avenue to help you become a leader when you are in fact a leader, then you're going to continue to do organized crime, which is what I was doing, right? Like I'm too smart for my own good because nobody was utilizing all of my genius, right? And so when I started applying, I got into all 4 of the TED Talks. And then at that point, it was then Kristen's decision. And so I met with each committee and asked them, tell me why I should choose you, which was new for them because they're like, girl, people don't get invited for TED Talk. And I was like, tell me why. But that goes back to, right, that preparation. So when I finally chose the one that I chose, which was Pleasant Grove, and Miss Lily was the one that I chose. And I chose her because not only did she want to do TEDx in a place that wasn't used to having it, right? She wanted to do it in kind of the suburbs, right? She also was very passionate about saying, I'm going to give you the best bang of your story. I'm going to make sure you get news coverage. I'm going to make sure that you get to, really utilize your skills and that you have all the support that you need. And she really gave all of the speakers that made the finalists, because it was about 200 people in each one of those auditions, and then they choose the top 10 and those 10 get to perform, right? And so I opened up the show, and the way that works is once you get selected the top 10, the best of the 10 gets to go first. So I got to go first and do my story, and it was hard. It took months. It was one of those things where I had to shut off TV. I didn't do anything but my speech every day of the week, and luckily I was already disciplined in being able to be studious, right? Because even as a criminal, right, you gotta know all the points, you gotta focus. So I had already had that foundation of that, and so I was comfortable. But I also knew that it was something out of my comfort zone. I'm used to speaking to kids. I could do that every day of the week. But now I would be speaking to an audience full of adults, and more importantly, now my story is going to be online where people can judge me, right? I wasn't getting judged when I was going into schools. I wasn't getting judged for being modeling or any of that. Kids come up to you and they hug you, they understand it, and they visualize your story. But adults come with all of this. Well, I was bullied. They come with all of these things.
Yeah.
Right? So I was a little nervous about that. And I did get some really negative comments. Actually, I don't go read the comments that are on the YouTube, but I did get people that personally found me on social media and wrote me and told me their horror stories and how I should have apologized. I mean, all of the things, right? And that comes with the territory. But I knew that if I'm supposed to be the model for the misguided, I can't be the model if I'm only in schools. I can't be the model if I'm only in courtrooms, if I'm staying in a building, if I'm being fearful and hiding behind what I think is my mission, because that wasn't my mission. You have had all of this preparation, all of this time going out to these events, speaking, going and modeling, speaking to get you prepared for what you're really supposed to be doing, which is talking about those experiences and those things that make people uncomfortable. That's why you have that thick skin the way that you were all of this time. And so doing the experience was great. I now have an agent who's really booking and doing all my stuff. Shout out to Laura. And that only came from doing that TED Talk. And now it has opened the doors where I'm not just speaking now. Even during COVID, I haven't been on social media because I've been doing Zoom calls with CEOs and executives from every industry that are wanting to know, what do we do for Gen Z and millennials in this time? How can we change the direction of our company? To think that I'm doing that now, when in 2019, when I got that random email and thought it was a lie, like, again, that just goes back to these little small moments that you have to start really embracing, because you never know where it's going to stem from there.
So true.
Yeah. So taking what you were saying about talking, first of all, your TED Talk, what I want to point out is that I'm happy that you chose to be vulnerable and explain what the source was for some of the behavior that might not have been as ideal for your parents and your teachers and whomever, and for you. That was really helpful. And I think over the course of the talk, getting to that part of it humanized you and allow people to get a sense of what sometimes people are going through. So yeah, I saw some of the comments, but also it's like, okay, well, yeah, this is what most people suspect things are going on. And the blessing was that you were able to have someone who tapped you and your mom who supported you. What I'm wondering about, as you're speaking to corporations that want to target to not millennials, Gen Zs, what are you telling them? Like, in terms of how do you think that people should be marketing to this group, specifically as they're going into the workforce?
I think one of the things that we have to realize is you have to acknowledge how quickly education has caught up to how the world is moving, right? Mm-hmm. Most of these students can graduate high school with their high school diploma and an associate's degree, right, at 18. So I can now go into college and be done with school really by the time I'm 20 if I wanted. And if I want to stay till 22, I have the option to now graduate with my bachelor's and a master's degree. So with that being said, these prereqs that we have on these job applications about you need to have 9 years of experience and here's all the degrees, I can get all those degrees before that 9 years. So we're going to have to be realistic about, well, maybe they don't have all of the experience, but I'm going to create a cohort, or I'm going to create some sort of leadership program that teaches them how to have that experience that doesn't take 9 years. Because if education isn't taking us 9 years to get there, how can you as a corporation needing this diverse talent to come in, how are you going to get them to want to work there? In addition to, I mean, this generation is so isolated before even COVID, and isolated in the sense of they have most of their conversations via text message. They're used to social media. They know how to use technology before forming a sentence. So with that being said, you cannot be the boss that thinks you need to be underneath your employees every day. I think COVID was a great experience for every senior exec to realize the productivity does not stop just because I'm not sitting there micromanaging them. And this may be a generation that wants to text message, be on Skype with their friends while eating and listening to music. They're going to do all of that and still get the job done. So you can't expect them to do it in the way that you want it to be done. It's really that flexibility. And I think the best leader that I've ever had, two of them actually, took the time to mentor me while being my boss and not parent me. I think that's the biggest part, right? You see someone that's your kid's age, you ideally think, let me tell them what they should be doing at work. That's not your job. As long as they do their job, they're respectful, and they don't violate a policy, then you have to say, explain to me how it is that you're able to multitask. I'm so amazed, and really understand what it is that they're doing and take an interest in them, and not an interest in them being a number that's supposed to follow what you want to do or supposed to be afraid of you. This generation grew up being very vocal, so they're going to speak. And for the most part, my babies, they will group together and quit the job. You know what I'm saying? Without a plan. And then they'll go on social media, and then it'll probably go viral. So if you don't want to be that employer, and if you don't want to be that leader that becomes a meme, I suggest you learn to have real conversations with them. And those conversations is with you silent and listening, right? Those conversations are you sharing your experience and what you said earlier, right? Being a human to them and not expecting that your title automatically means that they should give you respect. You still have to earn it. And I think when leaders are able to put themselves at that foot, right, of saying, just because I work at this major corporation, or maybe even a small corporation, just because I've got this title and it took me 27 years to get here, I don't need this next generation to inherit my same struggle of the journey. That expectation has to be out of the window, even for our age group, for millennials. We don't have to do that. And you should be happy. If you see us being entitled or feeling arrogant, you really need to change the way you look at that and say, man, I have empowered you to be able to get here as quickly as you have, but here's some things I don't want you to forget because you're quickly climbing up the ladder.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious to know from you too, as I got a Gen Z boys in the 7th grade, right? What do you think about the home learning right now? What do you think about all that? How has it been going? How do you think the kids have been responding to it? Is it something that's sustainable over a long term? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's a conversation that I've been having with school districts pretty often, that it's going to be unrealistic to think that next year we're going to be able to require them to go back to school 5 days a week for 8 hours a day.
That's true.
They may be at somebody's school, but they will not be in class.
I'm sorry, what'd you say? Wait.
You should speak to the New York City public school system, because they will tell you that is absolutely what's going to happen.
No, they will be they will be out of their house for sure. They might be on your campus for sure, but they will not be in class. And if they are in class, they will not be behaving in class. You will see the kids who used to be soft, sweet, and silent and just so happy to do their work. They will not be doing that. Instead, now that they have been at home and been exposed to what their parents do for a living, whether they're watching them on Zoom, whether they're hearing more discussions, whether they're watching TV and watching the news, they're going to now want to know, why are you teaching me things in school that have nothing to do with anything that I've seen at home? Right?
So true.
You're going to get more backlash from that. Why do I need to learn this? And I've also had the discussion with teachers realizing that there is no way that we can allow all the events that have occurred in 2020 and in 2021, that you don't bring those up in the classroom. It is no longer safe for you to just not comment, right? Because now your non-comment is that you are okay with the things that have happened. Our kids are going to be permanently scarred from this year. And it's going to be up to us, not as just in the education system, in the court system, us as parents, us as in the community, to have these conversations and explain and check in with them emotionally on how they feel. And it is no longer okay to just send them in their room where they're watching all this content that is continuing to fuel the flame, but none of us are actually speaking to them and giving them the room to speak their truth in the way that they want to speak it. And to think that they're going to go back to class for an 8-hour day, being quiet, not when they've all learned every TikTok dance that there is known to man, thinking that they're not going to touch their cell phones and they're going to, be quiet and listen. That's just unrealistic. So we're going to either have to cut down, and teachers are going to have the support that they need to be in those classrooms. And parents are going to you have now a wide opening of what your child's teacher really deals with. And think about it. They have a classroom full of 20, 30 to get this done in rotating populations, right? They mostly have 4 to 8 classes a week, a day of rotating groups of students. Your child is one of those students. So if you can't get them to listen to you at home, you see they're distracted, or you see that they're behind in learning, have some compassion for that teacher. Pay attention to them on appreciation day, send emails and understand. And I'm not saying side with the teacher all the time, because again, I was a child that got in trouble. So sometimes I'm not even doing nothing, but because my past history has shown you, I'm automatically out. So I'm not saying believe them over your child, but I am saying parents have to be more involved. I am saying that it's unrealistic to think that they're going to come back to school. And for most of the kids, they don't want to go back to school, right? Now they're ready to get into work. They don't see the purpose of it. So school is, yes, how we have made it efficient and easy for you to get all these degrees so quickly. We're going to now have to start changing the content that's being taught in order to really engage them with what's happening in the real world. We cannot keep teaching things back in the 1950s. You got to start talking about what's been going on in the 2000s in order to get their attention.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I'm a firm believer in that. And I don't like the curriculum that they teach for the most part. Like some of the things that I teach my son, we talk about financial literacy. We talk about stocks. We talk about ownership. We talk about, generational wealth, right? What does that mean? And all those type of things that aren't being taught in the classroom. But it's a balancing act, like Chantel said in New York. How do you balance the both, right? Because you come back to me and say, hey, we're only have a 4-hour class, right? Because they have to do this, they're permanently scarred, but I still got to work. So how do we balance the two to make it where the kids are getting, what they need, and then the parents are getting their time to provide?
Mm-hmm. I think that's where these programs come in, right? Like these partnerships. Why are there so many mentoring programs, so many outreach organizations that are not partnering together? I think that's when it becomes our spot to fill in the gap and to really collaborate, instead of thinking, I only want to work with this set of kids, or I want to work with all of them. But are you really effectively touching all of them? Could you share some of that wealth? Could you share some of that funding so that now we can fill in those gaps during those other hours of the day when parents need to be at work and kids are tapped out of school? How can we have these enrichment programs that keep them busy, but not just for busy work, just to say that they have something to do, but really teaching them how to go out and be the leaders that we want them to be? I mean, I think that's when we step in.
Yeah, totally agree. And Chantal, do you have any? I didn't realize it was past 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh
no, actually, I didn't have any last additions. I really appreciate your answer. I did want to ask you about women role models, but I have to jump, so I don't know what we should do, Jared.
Go part 2. That's it. That's what we're gonna do. We gotta be on a regular one now. We gotta be. That's all. But I just want to say, Kristen, thank you so much. Like, I enjoyed hearing your story. It was good hearing that. I never knew any of about the bullying. Me and you've had conversations. I never knew about that. I'm glad the audience got to learn your story. I think you're an amazing person. I know the kids love you. And, if you aren't connected with you, people aren't connected with Kristen, go to Instagram. You'll see how the kids love her. She's so passionate about it. And I appreciate all that you do.
What's your Instagram?
So everything to find me is at Kristen Geez.
Okay.
Good, Brandon. There you go. Across the board.
Across the board.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Kristen. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I enjoyed it. I look forward to hearing these follow-up questions.
Thank you so much, Queen. Have a great one. We're always rooting for you, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Talk soon.